The snow stretched endlessly across the plains, a pale, unbroken expanse under a bleeding sky of rose and violet. Silas McCall, 30 years old, trudged through it, his boots sinking into frost-crusted earth, each step a muted thump that echoed the hollow ache inside him. The wind tore at his coat and bit at his fingers, but he barely noticed. He had walked these plains long enough to know the loneliness that clung to him like a second skin, a cold shadow in every town, a murmur behind every glance. For all his height and broad shoulders, he had never felt warmth that wasn't tinged with fear or judgment. The memories of laughter at his size, the whispered rejections of women who mistook gentleness for weakness, pressed him downward. And yet, somewhere under the ache, a quiet curiosity flickered. Who, if anyone, could see him beyond the bulk of his frame and the solemnity he carried? Through the swirling snow, a small figure appeared, unmoving as the storm threatened to claim the world around her. Aylin Whitefeather, 20 years old, native-born, stood with the poise of a young pine bending yet unbroken against winter wind. Her hair, black as river stone, clung in icy strands to her face, her eyes bright with a fire that did not yield to frost or fear. Silas paused, his breath catching in the cold, uncertain whether to approach or retreat. There was something about her presence, quiet and resolute, that unsettled him. She was a flame in the endless white, and even from a distance, he felt a tug at the frayed edges of his heart. "You're mine now," she whispered, the words sliding on the wind, soft and deliberate. Silas froze, chest tightening, heartbeat thrumming like a distant drum. The claim was not of ownership in cruelty, but of recognition, a gentle insistence that he could exist in warmth without shame. His hand brushed instinctively over the scarred leather of his coat as if to steady himself, but he could not step back. Her gaze held him captive, an unspoken question lingering. Could he allow himself to be seen? Days passed as they moved through the snow together, not in grand declarations, but in small, careful gestures that spoke louder than words. Silas chopped wood under the pale dawn while Aylin tended the tiny fire near her cabin, hands dusted with frost and smoke. Their silences were not awkward, they were conversations of their own, the crackle of flames punctuating laughter that rose timidly from Silas, surprise dancing in his deep-set eyes. He began to notice the way she moved, how her steps were certain, deliberate, each motion respectful of the world around her. There was dignity in her labor, a rhythm that grounded him. With each shared task, each fleeting touch, he felt layers of shame and fear falling away, replaced by a fragile hope that had no need for pronouncement. Yet the world beyond the snow was not so gentle. Townsfolk murmured behind closed doors, eyes narrowing at the sight of them walking together, whispers riding the wind as silently as the snowflakes themselves. Silas felt the weight of their judgment press upon him, a familiar shadow that threatened to undo the courage he had been cultivating. Aylin, too, bore her own quiet battles, aware that her heart could be crushed under society's disdain. They retreated into the snow-laden forest, each day a careful negotiation between fear and connection. Still, in the moments when he adjusted her scarf against the bite of the wind, when she placed her gloved hand over his rough palm, the world outside ceased to exist. There was only warmth, fragile and earned, like sunlight glimpsed through a storm. The nights were the most intimate of their days. They huddled by the fire, the cabin walls trembling under the winter gale, sharing in silence. Silas would trace lines in the frost along the window pane, watching patterns form and vanish, mirroring the slow evolution of his heart. Aylin would watch him, noticing the way his eyes softened when he thought no one was looking, the gentle sigh that escaped him as if he were finally allowed to exhale. One evening, she placed a small sprig of pine in his hand, a token without need for words. Silas felt his throat tighten, his heart swollen with gratitude, and for the first time in years, he imagined a life that could exist without constant fear, without relentless judgment. But tenderness was always tested. A sudden howl tore through the night, the cry of a lone wolf or perhaps something closer to human sorrow, and Silas felt old instinctual fears rise. He rose, coat flaring against the firelight, to check the perimeter, while Aylin's hand clutched the warmth of his. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil within him, a reminder that survival demanded vigilance, that the world was indifferent to delicate hearts. Yet they endured, the night passing with only small tremors of fear, the dawn returning soft and forgiving. Love, as they discovered, was not always in grand gestures, but in quiet acknowledgement. Silas carved their initials into the trunk of a frost-slicked tree, his hands shaking slightly with emotion. Aylin leaned against him as if his presence alone could shield her from the wind. Each snowfall became a sanctuary, each glance a promise, and though the world outside whispered judgment, inside, they cultivated a private dignity that no one could diminish. Silas laughed more freely now, the sound mingling with the crackle of the fire, and Aylin allowed herself to dream quietly of a life where her heart was not caged by expectation. The climax of their connection arrived not in words, but in courage. During a sudden blizzard, Silas ventured out to rescue a stranded horse tangled in the icy brush, risking frostbite and fatigue without hesitation. Aylin watched, heart hammering, knowing the act was not of heroism alone, but of trust, of willingness to protect and claim life with quiet devotion. When he returned, soaked and wind-lashed, she tended his frost-bitten fingers, their hands entwining naturally over the small fire. Words were unnecessary. Their bond had been forged in shared vulnerability and steady courage. The day of their wedding arrived with snow falling softly, each flake a whisper of blessing. In a secluded clearing, witnesses only the wind and a handful of friends, Silas and Aylin exchanged a ceremony unburdened by pomp. Her hair was braided with frost flowers, his coat dusted with snow. No grand declarations were made, only the unspoken understanding of two souls who had survived fear and judgment, who had discovered warmth in a world designed to chill them. The snow swirled around them, muffling the world, allowing their union to exist in its own sacred space. And as they stepped hand in hand toward the horizon, each step carried quiet dignity and profound hope. Life, Silas realized, was often relentless, and the cold could feel infinite. Yet in the smallest acts of grace, sharing fire, steadying a hand, whispering reassurance, the heart could transform. Aylin's presence had shown him that warmth was not fleeting. It was cultivated, protected, and embraced. And for her, Silas' unwavering steadiness had revealed that belonging was possible, that love could exist without fanfare or expectation, blooming in quiet gestures and mutual respect. As the wind carried snowflakes across the plains, it also carried their laughter, soft and unbroken, through the empty spaces that had once seemed so vast and cruel. Silas and Aylin walked on, their shadows merging in the fading light, a testament to resilience, to courage, and to the profound truth that hearts can heal and flourish even in the harshest of landscapes. To the viewer, to anyone wandering through frost or judgment, the lesson remained: true warmth is found in patience, in small acts of grace, and in daring to let the soul be seen. And in that quiet revelation, the plains themselves seemed to lean closer, acknowledging the beauty of a love earned slowly, deeply, and without apology.